Acheampong stood in the palace, his world crumbling under the heavy accusation of a child's death. With each question thrown at him, he maintained his innocence, yet the lack of witnesses to support his claim deepened his despair. Alone and isolated, he faced the community's judgment while Obenewaa, his only possible ally, was unaware. Asleep during the critical moment the asthmatic child was brought to him. The family of the child united in their testimony against him, claiming the boy was in good health upon arrival at Acheampong's place. This coordinated stance sealed the herbalist's fate, wrapping him tighter in a net of conspiracy and betrayal. Acheampong felt the cold grip of hopelessness, recognizing the plot woven to ensnare him, with no escape in sight. His pleas of innocence to the chief and elders were desperate, a last reach for justice in a room filled with skeptical eyes. Acheampong, once a revered healer, now stood accused and helpless, his fate hanging by the thread of divine intervention. The pain of his situation was palpable, a man wronged by those he once served, clinging to a sliver of hope that the gods might yet clear his name. After enduring long hours of interrogation in the palace, Acheampong was wrongfully convicted of murder and sentenced to imprisonment. Despite the chief's inner belief in Acheampong's innocence, the absence of any witnesses to defend him left the chief with no choice but to adhere to the law, resulting in Acheampong's confinement. In a small act of mercy, the chief lessened the term from 20 to 10 years, but the damage was done. Obenewaa, upon learning of her husband's fate, was overcome with grief. Her tears flowed unceasingly, mirroring the sorrow of those who had once been beneficiaries of Acheampong's kindness and healing touch. The community, too, was plunged into mourning, for Acheampong was known to all as a compassionate and gentle soul, incapable of causing harm to any living creature. The injustice of his imprisonment for a crime he never committed cast a shadow of sadness and disbelief over the entire village, leaving them to grapple with the harsh reality of losing a beloved figure to an undeserved fate. The air was thick with lamentation for a man whose only fault was his inability to prove his innocence in a tragically flawed system. Acheampong, with a heavy heart, entrusted Obenewaa with the care of the pot, his life's anchor, and confided his faith in the gods, viewing his ordeal as a mere test he'd overcome. Obenewaa, tears streaming down her face, vowed to await his return, her voice trembling with hope and conviction in the divine. Her words, "I will patiently wait for you," echoed a promise laden with unwavering belief that the gods would not forsake Acheampong. The exchange was a poignant blend of faith, love, and the cruel bite of an unjust separation, leaving a raw ache in their intertwined souls. In the prison, Acheampong faced daily battles, his life a stark contrast to the healer he once was. Accused of murder, he bore the brunt of harsh treatment, his claims of innocence only intensifying his suffering. The prison guards, bound by duty, subjected him to relentless torture, aiming to force a confession. Every day brought the same grim routine, meager food, and 10 brutal lashes from a cane. With each lash, Acheampong's cries of innocence echoed through the prison walls, a painful testament to his steadfastness and the injustice he endured. Yet the guards, unmoved and following orders, continued their harsh discipline, indifferent to his pleas. His relentless ordeal turned his incarceration into a living nightmare, where each day tested his resolve and chipped away at his spirit. Acheampong's suffering was not just physical, but a deep emotional torment as he wrestled with the reality of his situation, punished severely for a crime he never committed. His resilience in proclaiming his innocence amidst such agony painted a harrowing picture of a man caught in the cruel gears of a merciless justice system. Obenewaa found herself engulfed in sorrow, her days marred by the absence of Acheampong. The chief had confiscated their farm, stripping Acheampong of his rights due to the unfounded accusation of murder, leaving them with nothing. In her struggle to find some semblance of normalcy, Obenewaa ventured into a small trading business in the market. Miraculously, her venture began to flourish, offering a glimmer of hope in her clouded world. Her routine became a testament to her enduring love and hope as she made daily visits to the prison, offering solace to Acheampong before facing the day's work. In their brief, bittersweet meetings, Acheampong's words were a mixture of love and optimism, urging Obenewaa to remain steadfast, promising a future together once his innocence would be proven in a decade's time. Each day, Obenewaa clung to Acheampong's assurances, fueling her resolve to keep the business and her spirit alive. Yet, beneath the surface of her newfound success lay a deep, unyielding pain, a constant reminder of the injustice that had torn her beloved from her side, casting a long shadow over her solitary existence. Obenewaa faced relentless pressure from men in the village, each urging her to forget Acheampong and marry them instead. They bombarded her with warnings, claiming Acheampong would never leave prison alive, as no accused murderer had ever survived that grim fate. Despite their persistent advances and grim prognoses, Obenewaa stood firm, rejecting their proposals with quiet strength. Her heart remained tethered to Acheampong, holding on to the sliver of hope that he would return to her. This daily torment of deflecting suitors and clinging to hope painted her life in shades of sorrow and steadfastness. Obenewaa's unwavering loyalty in the face of despair showcased her deep love and belief in Acheampong's innocence, as she endured the agonizing wait for his return, surrounded by doubters and naysayers. A year into Acheampong's imprisonment, tragedy struck again as Obenewaa fell ill. Confined to her home for months, her health deteriorated, consuming all her savings on treatments and ultimately leading to the loss of her business. Once again, she found herself dependent on her aging mother for support. As the 16th month of Acheampong's incarceration approached, despair began to take its toll on Obenewaa's mother. Weighed down by time and fading hope, she expressed her deep-seated fears to Obenewaa. With a voice heavy with sorrow, she confessed her dwindling strength and the pain of watching her daughter's life in standstill, her dreams of cradling a grandchild slipping away with each passing day. Her words pierced Obenewaa's heart, adding layers of grief to her already troubled soul. The agony of her own illness, the collapse of her livelihood, and the slow surrender of her mother's hope painted a bleak picture of their lives, overshadowed by Acheampong's absence. Obenewaa's mother, worn by the relentless grip of hardship, urged her daughter to find another man, doubting Acheampong's survival over the long decade ahead. The weight of their struggle was palpable in her plea, but Obenewaa's response was a steadfast testament to loyalty and love. She reminded her mother of her days as a cripple, shunned and unloved, until Acheampong's unconditional love transformed her life. He had not only loved and healed her, but had also given her the dignity of marriage, setting her apart in a community that once disregarded her. Obenewaa's voice trembled with emotion as she recounted her past, highlighting the stark contrast between her lonely past and the present, where men competed for her attention, all because of Acheampong's enduring love and care. She expressed her disbelief at the irony of the situation, where the same men who once ignored her now pursued her, blinded by her transformed exterior, yet ignorant of the depth of her devotion to Acheampong. Obenewaa's mother, clouded with unhappiness, persistently argued for abandoning Acheampong, labeling him as merely an outsider. She believed that forsaking him for a local man was Obenewaa's best choice. Her words cut deep, expressing regret over allowing the marriage, influenced solely by her daughter's disability and the bleak prospects it once signified. She confided in Obenewaa her fear that Acheampong, the stranger, would one day claim their children and return to his own people. This harsh stance stemmed from a place of protective maternal instinct, yet it inflicted pain and conflict within Obenewaa. The thought of betraying Acheampong, who had seen past her physical limitations and cherished her when no one else did, was unbearable. Her mother's words, though meant to secure a perceived better future for Obenewaa, echoed a sorrowful note of prejudice and loss, amplifying the emotional turmoil. The dialogue between mother and daughter became a heart-wrenching narrative of love, loyalty, and societal pressures, set against the backdrop of personal and communal expectations. Obenewaa found herself torn between the familial bonds and the profound connection with Acheampong, intensifying the sadness and pain of their predicament. Within the cold walls of the prison, Acheampong continued his healing work, tending to both fellow prisoners and guards, his gifts undimmed by his confinement. Meanwhile, his absence cast a shadow over the village, where sickness spread unchecked. Without Acheampong, the only herbalist of his caliber, many succumbed to illnesses that once would have been easily cured under his care. The void left by his imprisonment was deeply felt, particularly by those suffering from ailments who longed for his healing touch. Acheampong's humility and kindness shone even in the darkest corners of the prison, slowly earning him the respect and favor of the guards. His gentle nature and unwavering spirit, even in the face of unjust punishment, led to a shift in how he was treated. After enduring 2 years of daily whippings, the guards, moved by his character and perhaps guilt for their part in his suffering, ceased their harsh treatment. His continued benevolence, despite his own suffering, highlighted the tragic irony of his situation. A healer trapped, while those outside desperately needed his aid. 2 years had passed, and Obenewaa's visits to Acheampong became infrequent, her hope dwindling with each day. In this time of despair, a wealthy man approached Obenewaa's mother, proposing to marry Obenewaa and presenting a substantial sum of money as a gift. The mother, swayed by greed and the promise of wealth, eagerly accepted the money, concealing it within her garments. She assured the rich suitor that she would persuade Obenewaa to accept this lucrative proposal. The act of taking the money was a silent betrayal to Acheampong, who remained confined and isolated in prison. Obenewaa, once a beacon of steadfast loyalty, found herself ensnared in her mother's scheme, driven by desperation and the allure of financial security. The prospect of abandoning Acheampong for a life of comfort presented a painful dilemma, contrasting sharply with her previous vows of loyalty. This turn of events introduced a new layer of tragedy to their story, as Obenewaa was pulled between her fading hope for Acheampong and the tangible promise of a better life, illustrating the deep emotional conflict, betrayal, and the seductive power of greed. The next day, Obenewaa's mother presented her with a large sum of money, a gift from the wealthy suitor seeking her hand in marriage. She urged Obenewaa, pointing out their dire straits and lack of food, suggesting that waiting for Acheampong, whom she bleakly referred to as dead, was futile. "We can't miss this chance," she insisted, proposing that they could always repay Acheampong for his past kindness should he ever return. Obenewaa, engulfed in a sea of sadness and desperation, faced the heavy weight of her mother's words. The promise of immediate relief from their financial misery was tempting, yet the thought of betraying Acheampong tormented her soul. After wrestling with her conscience, the pain of their current suffering nudged Obenewaa towards acceptance of the proposal, despite the deep love and loyalty she felt for Acheampong. Her eventual capitulation to her mother's plan marked a poignant moment of surrender, not just to the pressing needs of the present, but to the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that had crept into their lives, casting a shadow over her once firm resolve to stand by Acheampong. Although the wealthy suitor was a native of the village, he rarely stayed, his business ventures taking him elsewhere. Obenewaa's mother argued that this man, with his wealth and local roots, was a better option for securing their future than Acheampong, now labelled a prisoner. She painted a grim picture of the uncertainty and delays in prosperity that awaited them should they rely on Acheampong's eventual return and struggle to rebuild his life. Swayed by these arguments, Obenewaa ceased her visits to the prison, leaving Acheampong to face the cold walls of his cell alone, his heart heavy with betrayal and sorrow. He was tormented by thoughts of his beloved Obenewaa, now entranced by the wealth and promises of another, and the fate of his precious pot, which symbolized his life and legacy. The lack of Obenewaa's presence signified a deeper neglect, not just of their love, but of the sacred trust embodied in the pot's care. Yet, clinging to a thread of hope, Acheampong consoled himself with the thought that since both he and Obenewaa were still alive, somehow the pot must still be intact. This small comfort did little to ease the sharp sting of abandonment and the gnawing fear of forgotten loyalty, as he grappled with the painful reality of his isolation and the loss of Obenewaa's love. 3 years into his imprisonment, Acheampong's world was shattered further when a new prisoner, a thief, arrived and shared the news of Obenewaa's engagement to a wealthy man. The revelation hit Acheampong like a tidal wave of grief, causing him to weep uncontrollably, his tears a raw expression of his agony and disbelief. The thought of Obenewaa, his beloved, entwined with another, ignited a deep-seated fear for the safety of the precious pot, which was intrinsically linked to his life and essence. Acheampong's love for Obenewaa had been unwavering, and the betrayal sliced through him, leaving a wound so deep that it confounded those around him. His sobs were those of a man who had laid bare his soul to his partner, entrusting her with his most sacred secret, only to have it turned against him. This moment of utter despair was compounded by the biting irony of hindsight, the cruel realization that his open-hearted trust, once given in a gesture of love, had become his greatest regret. The saying, "Had I known," is always at last. Several months past the 3-year mark of Acheampong's imprisonment, fate twisted as the very man who had falsely accused him of murder was thrust into the same prison for another crime. This individual, part of the group that had ambushed Acheampong in a bid to eliminate him so their leader could claim Obenewaa, now shared his confinement. Acheampong recognized him instantly, the architect of his downfall, the orchestrator of the lie that had cost him his freedom and happiness. Despite the surge of emotions, Acheampong remained silent, his pain internalized. He faced his accuser daily, a living reminder of the injustice he endured. There were no confrontations or accusations from Acheampong, only a deep, resigned sorrow. He carried the burden of knowing the truth, yet chose the path of stoic endurance, bearing the weight of his unjust imprisonment and the loss of Obenewaa in lonely silence. This painful episode was a stark illustration of Acheampong's tragic plight, surrounded by the walls of a prison that housed both the victim and the perpetrator of his misery, encapsulating the harsh realities of betrayal and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of profound injustice. For months, the man responsible for Acheampong's wrongful imprisonment shared the same prison space, witnessing the dignity and kindness with which Acheampong conducted himself. Acheampong's silence on the matter, his refusal to confront or accuse, unwittingly became a mirror reflecting the enormity of the man's guilt. He began to deeply regret his actions, realizing the innocence of the man he had wronged. Acheampong's behavior in prison, his kindness, his camaraderie, and the respect he garnered from both inmates and guards alike only intensified the guilt gnawing at the accuser's conscience. Observing the esteem Acheampong held, and hearing the prison's populace speak well of him, the accuser felt the crushing weight of his deceit. This daily confrontation with Acheampong's character and the widespread acknowledgement of his goodness served as a constant reminder of the injustice inflicted upon an innocent man. The accuser's regret grew with each passing day, haunted by the reality that his lies had caused such undeserved suffering to a man who, even in the face of betrayal and imprisonment, maintained his integrity and compassion. In the confined world of the prison, the cruel twist of genetics unveiled itself as the criminal who had falsely accused Acheampong and caused his unjust imprisonment suffered from asthma, the very ailment that had claimed his own child's life. This hereditary curse of asthma became a darkly poetic parallel, linking the fates of the accuser and the accused. One day, the criminal was seized by a severe asthma attack, his breaths becoming desperate, gasps for life. As panic ensued within the prison walls, calls for help echoed through the corridors, yet Acheampong stood apart, his eyes fixed on the man who had shattered his world. The air was thick with tension and unspoken thoughts of retribution, as Acheampong, faced with a choice, remained silent and motionless. The question loomed large. Would Acheampong step forward to save the life of the man who had shown him no mercy, or would he allow the cruel hand of fate to exact revenge? This moment of decision was charged with the raw emotions of anger, betrayal, and the possibility of justice or forgiveness. Meanwhile, the narrative of Obenewaa, torn between her past love and her current suitor, hung in the balance. Her story, intertwined with Acheampong's, awaited its next turn, full of potential revelations and consequences. What would become of their intertwined destinies, and how would Obenewaa navigate her complex feelings and loyalties? As these threads of fate, revenge and love twisted together, the anticipation for the next chapter in their saga grew. Viewers are invited to stay tuned to Ananse Web of Tales to witness the unfolding drama, the tests of character, and the ultimate paths chosen by those caught in this web of circumstances. The story's continuation promises to reveal deep emotions and pivotal decisions, urging audiences to subscribe, like, and share, while joining from across the globe in a collective breath of suspense. For those of you who enjoyed the video, as we eagerly await the next episode of this gripping story, we'd love to hear from you. Please tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Your anticipation and engagement fuel our passion for storytelling, and we truly appreciate your love and support for our videos. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and stay tuned for more.